Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're going past the typical Honest Dave image, and we're going to explore a side of Abraham Lincoln you might not expect. His spiritual side.
Oh, this will be interesting.
Think about it. You, as a Lincoln enthusiast, you probably know all the basics. Humble beginnings, self-made lawyer, wartime president.
Right, all that.
But what about his soul? Like, what did Lincoln actually believe, and how did that shape the way he led?
Yeah, good question.
So our guide today is historian Joshua Zeitz. He was featured on the Lincoln's God podcast episode from American History Hit.
Okay.
And he also wrote a book by the same name, which, let me tell you, it really challenges some of the assumptions about Honest Dave.
Okay.
We've got excerpts ready to go, so get ready. We're going to uncover how Lincoln's personal faith intertwined with all those huge changes in American religion, especially during the chaos of the Civil War.
I'm ready.
All right, let's unpack this. So Lincoln's dad, Thomas, he was a devout Baptist, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But not just any Baptist, a hard-shelled Baptist.
Exactly. Thomas Lincoln's faith was hardcore, very much rooted in Calvinism.
Okay.
Calvinism.
Yeah. It was a dominant force back then, especially in those frontier communities.
Calvinism, that's, predestination and all that.
Right.
Pretty intense stuff. So for our listener who might not be as familiar, what would you say was the biggest impact of that on young Abe?
Well, imagine this. You grow up believing your eternal fate was already decided.
Whoa.
Before you were even born. No room for hope or free will in that system.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Zeitz suggests this is what actually created a deep-seated skepticism in Lincoln that he carried throughout his life, actually.
Wow. So while America was being swept up in all these religious revivals, Lincoln was what, playing it cool?
Pretty much.
He even earned a reputation as a bit of an infidel.
It's true. Despite the potential political backlash, he refused to just, go through the motions. Lincoln was intellectually honest.
Even at the risk of, alienating voters. He was his own man, spiritually speaking.
But then he marries Mary Todd Lincoln. And she was devoutly Presbyterian. Talk about a clash of worldviews.
Oh, yeah.
I bet those dinner table conversations were interesting.
You can say that again. Mary's faith was unwavering. It's fascinating to consider how this played into their complex marriage and the different ways they saw it, meaning and comfort.
And then the Civil War breaks out.
Yeah.
Throwing the whole country and Lincoln personally into turmoil.
Yeah.
Absolute turmoil.
That's where things get really interesting. The war becomes this spiritual battleground, both sides claiming God was on their side. People desperately needed faith to make sense of the unimaginable loss.
And for Lincoln, who had already suffered so much personal tragedy, especially with the death of his son Willie.
Right.
It makes you wonder, did this push him towards a deeper spiritual understanding?
It seems like it did. He never became a fire and brimstone preacher or anything, but something definitely shifted. You start seeing him refer to himself as an instrument of God. He begins to see a divine purpose in all the suffering, a path to national redemption.
Wow, that's powerful. So he goes from a skeptic to seeing himself as part of God's plan.
Yeah.
That's a huge change.
It is. And it shows in his speeches, too.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Think about the Gettysburg Address with its subtle biblical allusions and themes of sacrifice and rebirth.
Right.
It's like we're hearing Lincoln's faith evolving in real time.
Wow. But this wasn't the same as the warm, fuzzy God of those revival tents, was it?
Not at all. Lincoln's God was more distant, inscrutable, more like the God of his Calvinist upbringing, actually. Almost like he'd come full circle, but on his own terms.
So interesting. This shows a real complexity to his spiritual evolution, wouldn't you say?
I would, absolutely.
So we have a man here wrestling with doubt, leading a nation that's in crisis, and searching for meaning right in the middle of it all.
It's quite a story.
It makes you wonder, how did that internal struggle shape his actions as president?
That's a great question. It's almost like a puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah.
We see these pieces, his skepticism, his wife's faith, the war's impact, this evolving instrument of God idea.
It's a lot to unpack.
How do you think it all fits together?
It's like this idea of Lincoln as a man of destiny really stands out to me. Almost like he was chosen by God to lead the nation through this awful crisis. But at the same time, he's wrestling with his own doubts, his own uncertainties. That's got to create some internal tension.
Absolutely. It's almost Shakespearean, isn't it? This man grappling with these huge responsibilities, but also questioning his own beliefs.
Yeah.
And it's during this time, this period of intense, like personal and national upheaval, that Lincoln's rhetoric takes a fascinating turn.
You're right. It's like his speeches become these battle cries filled with biblical imagery, appeals to a higher purpose.
Exactly. He starts using this powerful religious language, almost like a preacher rallying his congregation. He talks about sacrifice, redemption, the judgment of God.
Yeah.
It's incredibly potent stuff.
But some might say, hold on a minute, wasn't Lincoln a skeptic?
Yeah.
Is he just playing politics here?
Right, right. That's a question that a lot of historians have wrestled with. Was he being genuine, or was it just clever rhetoric to unite a divided nation?
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you look at his second inaugural address, given just weeks before he was assassinated,
All right.
it's hard not to feel the weight of his words.
Oh, absolutely. That speech is a masterpiece. It's almost like a confession, a reckoning with the nation's sins and the profound cost of war.
Yeah. I love that line where he says both North and South read the same Bible and pray to the same God. It's like he's acknowledging this shared faith, but at the same time, he's confronting the hypocrisy of using it to justify violence.
That's what's so brilliant about Lincoln's rhetoric. He's able to tap into these deep-seated religious beliefs,
Right.
but he's also challenging people to live up to their own ideals.
I see. But even with all the religious language you mentioned before, that Lincoln's God wasn't the same as like those fiery preachers of the Second Great Awakening.
Right.
So what makes his concept of God like unique?
That's a key insight, and it really gets to the heart of Lincoln's spiritual journey. He was shaped by, his early Calvinism, with its emphasis on predestination and this distant, unknowable God.
Okay.
And even as he embraced like religious rhetoric, that core belief seems to have stuck with him.
So it's not the God of comfort and personal salvation,
Right.
but more of a force of destiny shaping the course of events.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Lincoln's faith so fascinating. It's not about finding easy answers or escaping from the harsh realities of life. It's about grappling with doubt, confronting tragedy, and ultimately seeking meaning in the midst of suffering.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe that's why his story still like resonates with us today, even if our own beliefs are different. I mean, we can all relate to that struggle to find meaning in a world that can be, well, chaotic.
Absolutely.
And often cruel. But what about his critics? Some might argue that this distant God concept, it made him, I don't know, cold or unfeeling. How would you respond to that?
That's a valid point, but I think it's important to remember the context. Lincoln was leading a nation torn apart by war. He had witnessed, unimaginable suffering.
Right.
Perhaps that distance from God was a way of coping,
Yeah, yeah.
with the immense burden of leadership and the moral complexities of the conflict.
It's like he needed that distance to make those really tough decisions, knowing that ultimate judgment belonged to a higher power.
That's a fascinating interpretation, and it raises another question. How did this idea of a distant God, coupled with his belief in being an instrument of God, influence his actions as president?
Now that's a deep dive. It makes you wonder, did he feel a sense of responsibility, almost a divine mandate to end slavery and preserve the Union?
Precisely, and that sense of purpose, of being guided by a higher power, might explain his unwavering commitment to those goals, even in the face of, intense opposition and personal risk.
But how did he reconcile this with his earlier skepticism?
Yeah.
It seems like there's a real tension there.
There is, and I think that tension is part of what makes Lincoln's story so compelling. He was a man of contradictions, constantly evolving, wrestling with his beliefs, trying to find his way in a world that offered, very few easy answers.
And maybe that's the takeaway for our listener.
Yeah.
Lincoln's journey reminds us that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking questions, grappling with doubt.
Yeah.
And finding meaning in the midst of uncertainty.
Beautifully put. And perhaps in that sense, Lincoln's spiritual journey offers a powerful model for us all as we navigate the complexities of our own lives and seek to make sense of the world around us.
So we've seen how Lincoln's faith shaped his leadership during one of the most challenging periods in American history.
Right.
But what about his legacy? How do his beliefs continue to influence our understanding of leadership and the role of faith in public life?
That's a great question. Lincoln's legacy is multifaceted. I mean, he's remembered as the great emancipator, the savior of the Union, a master orator, and a man of profound moral character.
Yeah.
But I think his spiritual journey offers a more nuanced understanding of his leadership.
In what way?
It reveals his humanity, his struggles, his doubts. It reminds us that even the greatest leaders are human, grappling with complex issues, trying to find their way amidst uncertainty.
It makes it more relatable, wouldn't you say? Not just a figure on a pedestal,
Yeah.
but a real person wrestling with these big questions.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes his story so powerful. It inspires us to ask ourselves, how do our own beliefs shape our actions? How do we find meaning and purpose in the face of adversity?
And maybe, just maybe, by exploring Lincoln's spiritual journey, we can find some guidance for our own.
That's the beauty of history. It's not just about the past.
Right.
It's about illuminating the present and inspiring us to create a better future.
Well said. Now, speaking of the present, it's striking how relevant Lincoln's story feels today, especially in a world where religious beliefs are often used to justify division and conflict. What lessons can we learn from his approach to faith and leadership in our current context?
That's a crucial question, and I think one of the most important lessons we can glean from Lincoln's example is the importance of humility and empathy.
Okay.
In engaging with those who hold different beliefs.
Right. He never tried to force his own views on others, but rather he sought to understand their perspectives and find common ground.
Exactly. And he recognized the power of religious language to inspire and unite. But he also understood the dangers of using faith to justify intolerance or violence.
So it's not about erasing our differences, but rather finding ways to bridge those divides and work together towards a common goal.
Precisely. And I think that's one of the most enduring legacies of Lincoln's leadership. He demonstrated that faith can be a powerful force for good, but it must be tempered by humility, compassion, and a willingness to engage in dialogue with those who hold different views.
And that's a message that resonates deeply in our current world.
Absolutely. Lincoln's journey reminds us that in a pluralistic society, finding ways to coexist peacefully and respectfully with those who hold different beliefs, it's not just a moral imperative, it's essential for the health and well-being of our communities and our nation.
Lincoln's story shows us that leadership isn't just about power or authority.
Right.
It's about serving a higher purpose. And that purpose can be rooted in a deep sense of morality.
Yeah.
A belief in something greater than ourselves, even if we don't always have all the answers.
It's about leading with both your head and your heart.
And maybe that's the most valuable lesson we can take away from Lincoln's spiritual journey, that the most effective leaders are those who are guided by a strong moral compass, even as they grapple with doubt, uncertainty, and the complexities of the human experience.
That's a powerful insight, and it brings us back to the question you posed earlier. How do we find meaning and purpose in our own lives, especially in a world that can often feel chaotic and unpredictable?
I think Lincoln's journey suggests that it's a process, a constant evolution. It's about being open to new experiences, challenging our own assumptions, and seeking wisdom from those around us.
And perhaps most importantly, it's about finding ways to use our own beliefs and values, whatever they may be, to make a positive impact on the world around us.
Lincoln's story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can find solace, guidance, and a renewed sense of purpose in the pursuit of a cause greater than ourselves. And maybe that's the most enduring legacy of Honest Abe. Not just his political achievements, but the enduring example of his character, his resilience, and his unwavering belief in the power of humanity to overcome even the most daunting challenges.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Lincoln's life and legacy continue to inspire us to strive for a more just and compassionate world, a world where faith and reason can coexist, where differences are respected,
Yeah.
and where the pursuit of a common good unites us rather than divides us.
A powerful thought to ponder as we conclude our deep dive into the spiritual journey of Abraham Lincoln. You know, it's amazing how we can look back at history and find these echoes in our own lives. Like Lincoln's story makes me wonder, did he ever have moments where his personal faith clashed with like the political realities of the time? You know, there's those tough calls where maybe what he believed conflicted with what he had to do as president.
That's a really good point. And Zeitz actually, he really gets into this in the podcast. He points out that Lincoln, despite becoming more open about his faith as the war went on, he always kept a certain separation between church and state.
So even though he was using religious rhetoric, he wasn't trying to like turn America into a theocracy.
Exactly. He respected that line.
Yeah.
And that was controversial back then, just like it can be today.
Oh, I bet.
Some folks, especially those who were caught up in the Second Great Awakening fervor, they wanted a president who was basically a preacher in chief.
Wow. Can you imagine like campaign speeches turning into sermons?
Right.
But Lincoln held firm to his own vision.
He did, and I think it speaks to his intellectual honesty, which we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
He was willing to draw on the power of faith, but not to exploit it for purely political gain.
It's like he understood the difference between using faith to inspire people and using it to manipulate them.
That's a great way to put it, and it's a distinction that's just as relevant today as it was back then.
Yeah.
I mean, we see politicians all the time using religious language to appeal to certain voters, sometimes even to demonize their opponents.
It makes you wonder what would Lincoln think of our current political climate? Do you think he'd be like dismayed by how religion is sometimes used to divide people rather than unite them?
It's hard to say for sure, obviously, but based on what we know about his character and his beliefs, I suspect he'd be saddened by the way that faith is often weaponized for political gain. He was at heart a unifier.
Yeah.
He believed in bringing people together, not driving them apart.
That's a powerful message, especially in our increasingly polarized world. We could all use a little more of Lincoln's unifying spirit, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
But let's go back to this idea of him as an instrument of God. It's a pretty bold claim, right? What do you think he meant by that?
That's one of the most intriguing aspects of Lincoln's spiritual evolution. It suggests a shift from his earlier skepticism towards a belief that he was playing a specific role in God's plan, almost like he was chosen for this moment in history.
And given the magnitude of the challenges he faced,
Mm-hmm.
the war, slavery, keeping the country together, it's almost understandable that he might seek that kind of divine reassurance, like okay, this is bigger than me. I need help from above.
Exactly. It's a very human response to extraordinary circumstances, and I think it also speaks to his sense of humility. He wasn't claiming to be some sort of prophet or messiah. He saw himself as a tool, an instrument being used by a higher power to achieve a greater purpose.
It's like he surrendered to something bigger than himself.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and it's a theme that runs throughout his story. We see it in his willingness to listen to others, to consider different viewpoints, to change his mind when presented with new information. It's a far cry from the rigid, self-righteous leadership we often see today.
It makes you wonder if that humility, that openness to something beyond himself was part of what made him such an effective leader.
It's certainly a possibility, and it's a quality that's worth reflecting on, especially for those in positions of power. The ability to listen, to learn, to acknowledge one's own limitations. Those are qualities that seem increasingly rare in our leaders today.
It's almost like Lincoln's story. It offers a blueprint for a different kind of leadership, one that's grounded in humility, compassion,
Mm.
and a deep sense of purpose.
That's a powerful insight, and it brings us back to the core of this deep dive. What can we learn from Lincoln's spiritual journey? How can his story guide us in our own lives, especially as we navigate the complexities of the modern world?
For me, one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of embracing uncertainty.
Oh,
Lincoln wasn't afraid to grapple with doubt, to ask tough questions, to evolve in his thinking. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't pretend to.
that's so crucial. We live in a world that often demands, certainty, quick solutions, black and white answers. But Lincoln's story reminds us that it's okay to not know everything, to be open to new ideas, to change our minds. In fact, that's often how we grow and learn.
It's like he's giving us permission to be lifelong learners,
Yeah.
to stay curious, to never stop questioning and exploring.
Exactly. And I think that's a message that's especially relevant for young people today.
Hmm.
They're facing a world that's more complex and uncertain than ever before. Lincoln's example shows
Yeah.
that it's okay to embrace that uncertainty, to lean into the unknown, to trust that we can find our way even when the path ahead isn't clear.
It's almost like he's saying, don't be afraid to doubt. Don't be afraid to question. That's how you find your own truth.
Beautifully put, and I think that's a message that's worth holding on to, no matter what our beliefs may be. Lincoln's story reminds us that faith is not about blind acceptance
Yeah.
or rigid dogma. It's about seeking meaning,
Yep.
wrestling with doubt, and ultimately striving to live a life of purpose and integrity.
And maybe, just maybe, in that process of seeking and striving, we can find a little bit of Lincoln's spirit within ourselves,
Hmm.
the courage to lead with humility,
Mhm.
the compassion to bridge divides, and the unwavering belief in the power of humanity to overcome even the most daunting challenges.
What a powerful way to sum up this deep dive. Lincoln's journey offers a timeless reminder that the search for meaning is a lifelong endeavor. It's a journey that requires both head and heart,
Right.
both reason and faith, both a willingness to challenge our own beliefs and a commitment to living our values in the world.
It's a journey we all share in our own unique ways, and maybe by reflecting on Lincoln's path, we can find some guidance and inspiration for our own.
Well, thank you for joining us on this exploration of Lincoln's spiritual journey. We hope it's sparked some new insights and perhaps even some questions for you to ponder as you continue your own journey of discovery.
Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep diving deep.